Now that we have SQL Developer set up, we can go through some basics on how to use it. Have in mind that some of the parts explained in this video might not be clear to you until you go through the whole course, but you can always refer back to this video. Okay, so let's start. The first layout when we have SQL Developer started up is the following one. In case some window, some layout messes up, you can always return that to the factory settings. You can do that by going to Window and reset Windows to factory settings. Excellent. So let's make our connection to our HR schema. We can do that on the part of connections, and we have Oracle connections, and we can just double click to it. SQL Developer is going to automatically open up a worksheet. This is a part where we write all of our queries. So let's write a query just to see how the results are presented. Let's write select all from employees, semicolon, and we're going to run it. I can press the run statement button, or I can just press Ctrl Enter. That's it. Now the results are presented on the lower part of the window. Cool. A cool feature of SQL Developer is that it can auto-format queries. The query in this format might not seem very appealing, especially if we have a lot of columns, we're joining a lot of tables, and it can be really long sausage, let's call it. And we can just select that query and press the format, and that's it. Our query now looks much more better. We can also format the whole worksheet by clicking on the empty field of the worksheet and pressing the format. So right click and format. A cool feature from SQL Developer is that we can expand a star, which means select all from some table. So when I hover over the star, SQL Developer presents expand field. So we can just click right here, and it's gonna present to us all of the columns of the star. So select all to the all columns names, right? And let's format that again. Excellent. Sometimes we're gonna execute multiple queries on our worksheet. So for example, let's select all from departments. And here are the results. In some cases, I wanna leave that result on the screen. As you can see, the departments result have replaced the employees part. And I can pin this query result. So I pinned it right now. And I can execute the previous query, and it's gonna be presented in another tab, right? So for example, if I wanna make a comparison between the tables which have relation, so for example, Stephen King has department ID 90, I can go back to the department, and I can see the department 90 is executive. Excellent. Sometimes when I run a lot of queries and pin them over here, I don't know which query that was. I can check that from the SQL button. And we can see this result is from select all from departments. Right. In case that I delete a worksheet, all of the results. So for example, I'm gonna close this. I'm not gonna save changes. And I don't know what has been executed. I can check that in SQL History. So I can go to View and SQL History. And I can see all the queries that I have run in previous time, right? All right, let's close this and make another SQL worksheet. This time I'm gonna do that with button over here, and I'm gonna pick again the HR. As we can see, we are already connected, but we are gonna open a worksheet. If I would like to change the connection, so the queries from the worksheet go to another database, I can pick that up from the right-hand side. Excellent. Let's write again our query. This time I'm not gonna reformat it, but I'm gonna write it as it should look. So select all from employees. Excellent. Let's execute. Let's say I do want to know more information about that table. I can just right click on it and I can go the open declaration. Here we can see data for each column, which type it is it nullable, if it has default data when it's inserted, which ID of the column is, and the description of the column, right? I can also look that in a pop-up window. It's just pop-up describe, and the same stuff is presented to us, right? There is a lot of other data presented in that window. For example, primary keys. So under the constraints, so we can see primary key is over here on which column. Cool. And a lot of other details, which are not important at the moment. Sometimes we execute queries which have a lot of columns as a result. And for example, we just want to see one row of the results. I can do that by clicking on that row and field, right? And single record view. Now I have data presented in a much more appealing way. Cool. Another cool feature is that I can do automatic count of results. I just press right click and count rows. Exit. Nice. Information about tables can also be seen from the left-hand side under the connections. So for example, if I expand the tables, I can see all of the tables present here. I can filter that. And for example, I'm only interested in the employees, right? I'm just going to type EMPL and I'm going to do the percentage now. This means that it's going to search for all the tables that have EMPL as first letters, right? Okay. And now I filtered everything on the tables. Excellent. On the left-hand side, we can also see a lot of other stuff, which are not imported for this course and the exam. The things like tables, indexes, views are, but packages, procedures, functions are not at all. Another cool feature, which I do use a lot while developing stuff, is using the code snippets. So if I want to save this query, I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to save it as snippet, right? Save a snippet. And I'm going to add it to a new folder. I can see it again if I go to View, Snippets, right? And it's under folder SQL course. It's over here. For example, if I want to delete this and recreate it as we have it already saved, I can just pull it over here and you have it again, right? You can do that multiple times. We're going to paste it. This comes handy when we repeat a lot of similar stuff. For example, create tables and we want to have a quick reference to it, right? I do encourage you to write everything manually from start until you get your grips on it, okay? We can also save our worksheets. For example, if I want to save this simple document, I can do that by pressing the save button and I can have all of the worksheets open up right here. For example, if I open up another worksheet, I write a query over here, right? I open up another one, I write some query over here. And when closing the SQL Developer, to us, it's going to be presented if you want to save those documents. The next time when I start SQL Developer, those worksheets are going to be present right away. Another great thing about the SQL Developer is exporting data. For example, if we have some complex query that we had to do on our job and we want to export the data out. So we can export that as insert command, as CSV, Excel, everything. How we do that is following. We just right click on the result and we do the export. And we pick up the format, for example, CSV, and all of the preferences that are needed, right? Nice. Another cool feature, which we have really handy, is when we do some insertion updates to the tables, we can do automatically commit or rollback changes by following buttons. So this is a commit or rollback. So for example, I don't have to write the commit command and execute it. to save our changes, for example, for insertion of some data into table, I can just press that button and it's going to commit. Or if I want to roll back, I can roll back, right? Excellent. Have in mind that SQL Developer is really powerful too. We could make a whole another course just about SQL Developer. However, that is not necessary for the exam or this course, as we are going to focus on the knowledge of SQL and not on clicking around some graphical interface. Okay? Excellent. Just have in mind for SQL Developer as a tool which helps you to gain knowledge and learn faster. Excellent. See you in the next one.